I never thought being nice could land you in a neighborhood war, but here I am sipping my coffee, watching my life slowly turn into a real-life HOA nightmare. It all started with a knock on my door, the kind of knock that seems friendly but hides trouble. And behind it, Karen, HOA president, self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, and apparently a master manipulator. Hi, I've been thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if we built some luxury cabins here? 50 of them, right along the edge of your property, she said, all smiles and perfectly polished nails. I blinked. 50 cabins, my first thought, well, that sounds ambitious. My second thought, what could possibly go wrong? I guess I was too polite or maybe too naive, but I nodded. Sure, let's discuss it, I said, shaking her hand. Big mistake. That handshake was basically signing the first page of a very expensive, very chaotic HOA script. I smiled politely while she rattled on about community perks, eco-friendly designs, and everyone getting along beautifully. A few days later, the first bulldozer rumbled onto my land. And let me tell you, there's nothing subtle about 50 luxury cabins being dropped onto what used to be peaceful forest. Trees went down, dirt flew everywhere. Contractors screamed at each other in a language I didn't know existed, and Karen, bless her soul, was there taking notes like it was a military operation. One morning, she measured the slope of a tiny hill for over an hour, I kid you not. And then I noticed it. The only road that led to the property, the dirt path winding like a secret artery through the woods, was mine. Legally, completely mine. I didn't say anything. I just leaned back, secretly delighted, as the delivery trucks struggled to navigate puddles, mud, and my perfectly timed random tree branches blocking their way. Karen was oblivious, of course. She thought she had everything under control. She had spreadsheets, maps, emergency contact lists, and the kind of enthusiasm only a true HOA president can possess. She even started assigning colors to mailbox posts before a single cabin was finished. I chuckled every time she made a decree about perfect community aesthetics while a bulldozer toppled a tree in the background. But there was something deeper happening, something that made this project far more entertaining than I ever expected. The contractors were frustrated, deliveries were late, Karen was panicking, and me, I was calm, too calm, because I had a secret that would soon turn this little community improvement into a full-blown HOA disaster. Every time a delivery truck skidded to a halt in the mud or a trailer got stuck, I sipped my coffee and smiled. Nobody knew that the road they relied on, the very lifeline of this luxury cabin paradise, was mine. They had no idea the key to their perfect community wasn't in their rules, their meetings, or even their fines for miscolored mailboxes. It was in my hands, or rather, under my control. And I could see the panic building already. Little things, a contractor scratching his head at a map, Karen packing and muttering about access issues, residents wondering why their deliveries were late. To them, it was chaos. To me, it was entertainment, the calm before the storm, and trust me, this storm was only just beginning. I even started thinking ahead. How much fun could I have watching the HOA try to fix their own mistakes when the only road they depended on was privately owned? My mind raced with ideas, small delays, minor blockages, friendly suggestions about access fees. Oh, the possibilities were endless, and the best part, they wouldn't even suspect that I wasn't just another neighbor trying to be helpful. I was the puppet master, quietly pulling the strings while chaos brewed around me. By the end of that first week, I realized something terrifying for them. They were building their dream community on my land, and they had absolutely no idea who really controlled it. And me, I was just getting started. Because here's the thing about HOAs, they love rules, they love control, and they hate surprises. And I was about to become the biggest, most entertaining surprise of all. By the second week, I started questioning my life choices, or at least the choice to let Karen and the HOA loose on my property. You see, luxury cabins is a lot like saying silent fireworks, sounds peaceful until the chaos arrives. The trucks arrived early, too early. I'd barely had my first sip of coffee when the earth trembled under the weight of bulldozers. Dirt flew everywhere, coating my driveway like powdered sugar from a really bad baking experiment. Contractors shouted at each other like it was an Olympic sport, and Karen, well, she was everywhere, clipboard in hand, measuring angles, checking elevations, and lecturing anyone who dared breathe too loudly. I swear, if someone had dropped a pencil wrong, she would have issued a formal citation. And then came the residents. A few neighbors wandered in, curious to see their future community paradise. They smiled nervously, waving at me as if I were somehow in on the joke, which in a way I was. I nodded, trying to look innocent, all while secretly plotting my own little HOA apocalypse. The chaos was beautiful. I started noticing patterns. Contractors arguing over which tree to cut, Karen screaming over the wrong shade of gray for siding, and delivery trucks getting stuck in the mud I so conveniently left unleveled. The HOA thought they had a plan, they had spreadsheets, they had emergency committees. They had Karen yelling at anyone who dared disagree with her, and yet somehow everything was going sideways, slowly, predictably, deliciously. One afternoon, I strolled past a delivery truck carrying a stack of cabin doors. The driver looked at me like I was the last hope for humanity. "Is there a way to get through?" he asked, sweat dripping down his face. I smiled innocently. "You'll find a way," I said and walked away. He spent the next 20 minutes circling, getting stuck, cursing under his breath. I couldn't help it, I chuckled, quietly of course. Karen, meanwhile, was in full panic mode. She had spreadsheets in one hand, a walkie-talkie in the other, and a voice that could shatter glass. "The gates must be symmetrical, the fences must be exactly 5 feet and 3 inches. Who allowed that truck to park there?" Her fury was like watching a volcano erupt in slow motion. And every time she looked at me, I smiled politely, sipping my coffee like a monk watching the world burn. But here, where it got interesting, every contractor, delivery driver, and resident relied on one thing to get anywhere: the road, the very same road I owned. And they had no clue. Every stuck truck, every delayed delivery, every frustrated groan from Karen's lips, it all traced back to me. I wasn't even touching anything yet. I was just letting nature, mud, and poor planning do the work for me. That night I sat on my porch, watching the sun set behind the half-built cabins. The smell of sawdust, diesel, and panic filled the air. Karen was packing somewhere in the trees, probably plotting the next disaster to fix the previous one. The residents were frustrated, muttering about delays. Contractors were arguing over which pile of lumber belonged to which cabin. And me, I felt calm, almost godlike, almost. I even started leaving little surprises in my head. A random mud puddle here, a strategically placed tree branch there, nothing permanent, nothing illegal, just enough to keep the wheels of chaos turning. The best part, Karen had no idea. She thought she was in control, she wasn't even close. And the residents, well, they had started to whisper. "Who owns this road anyway? Why is delivery always late?" Little questions, but each one a spark in the powder keg of HOA anxiety. I leaned back and smiled. They were asking the right questions, but the wrong person. By the end of the second week, I realized something crucial. This wasn't just construction chaos. This was a test of patience, control, and nerves. And in this game, I held all the cards. They had the cabins, yes, but I had the road, the only way in. And soon, very soon, that little detail was going to make every single one of them realize who was really in charge. And Karen, she had no clue her perfect little paradise was built on my terms, not hers. By the third week, I was starting to understand something fundamental about HOAs. They're not about community. They're about control, absolute suffocating control, and if you ever dared stand in the way, or better yet, watch silently while chaos unfolded, they'd lose their minds. Karen had reached a new level of obsession. It wasn't enough that the cabins were going up, that the dirt trucks were stuck, or that contractors argued like they were on a reality show. No, she had spreadsheets, checklists, and rules about everything you could imagine. "No mailbox shall be more than 2.5 inches taller than any other mailbox," she announced at one meeting, pointing at me with such intensity I swear she could make a grown man cry. I smiled. Inside, I was thinking, perfect. Keep talking, Karen, keep losing your mind. The rules kept multiplying. Speed bumps had to be placed exactly 12.3 feet apart. All cabin doors must face exactly southeast. Every fence post must align with the stars. I started imagining HOA inspectors with little telescopes checking the celestial alignment of every property. The absurdity was intoxicating. Meanwhile, deliveries were still a nightmare. Trucks got stuck. Lumber piles blocked the official access paths. Contractors argued over whose blueprints were authentic. And me, I stayed calm, lurking in the background, quietly enjoying every bit of it. The road, the one everyone desperately needed to get anywhere, was still mine. And that little secret made everything 10 times funnier. One morning, Karen stormed over, dragging half the HOA board behind her, clipboard flailing in the air. "You need to make sure these trucks follow the rules," she barked, pointing at a delivery driver who had clearly been through hell just to get the plywood into position. I leaned against my porch railing, pretending to be sympathetic. "I'll see what I can do," I said. The driver looked at me with a mix of hope and despair. I smiled politely. Every day, I noticed little fractures forming. Karen's perfect community was unraveling like a cheap sweater. Residents were whispering, contractors were muttering, even her loyal HOA board members were starting to exchange glances as if to say, "Is she serious?" And yet nobody dared question her. Except me, silently in my mind, enjoying the chaos like a director watching his masterpiece unfold. Then came the fence incident. Apparently, one of the cabins had a fence post that was slightly askew by about half an inch. Karen held an emergency meeting. I kid you not, she had charts, diagrams, and even a laser level set up in the middle of the dirt path to verify alignment. I watched from my porch, sipping my coffee, and whispered to myself, and you wonder why people dread HOAs. But there was more fun to be had. Every time she panicked about a rule, the road had a little surprise waiting for her. Mud puddles, slightly shifted gravel, or a random fallen branch, nothing permanent, just enough to make deliveries late, workers frustrated, and Karen more unhinged. And yes, I smiled every single time. By now, I was starting to get reports from contractors. We can't get the cement mixer through again, we're stuck near the north entrance. And every single time I said innocently, oh, that's strange. Meanwhile, in my head, I was thinking, yes, that's exactly what I was hoping for. It was at that moment I realized something crucial. The cabins, the rules, the meetings, it didn't matter how perfect Karen thought she was making things. None of it mattered if she couldn't even get to the property. She had control on paper, sure, but I had control in reality. The one thing everyone relied on and assumed they had access to, mine, and they had no idea. And that's when the real fun started to form in my mind. Karen could issue fines, threaten lawsuits, and wave her little HOA magic wand all she wanted. But as long as the road stayed in my hands, every rule she made, every order she barked, every spreadsheet she created, it all depended on me allowing access. I leaned back on my porch as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the half-built cabins. The wind carried the distant sound of shouting, trucks grinding in mud, and Karen's high-pitched panic, and I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The real storm was coming. Because you see, HOAs thrive on rules, they crave order, but chaos, that's an entirely different language, and I was fluent. By the fourth week, the chaos had reached a level even I hadn't fully anticipated. Every day felt like a slow-motion disaster movie, and somehow I was sitting in the director's chair, sipping coffee while the fireworks went off around me. Deliveries were late, lumber piles were in the wrong spots, contractors were yelling at each other like gladiators in the dirt arena of my property, and Karen, she had officially lost her mind. One morning, I watched her march down the driveway with a measuring tape, stopping every few feet to take notes and shout instructions into her walkie-talkie. No, the gravel is off by 2 inches, I said 2 inches, she screamed, her face red enough to power a small neon sign. The HOA board members were in full panic mode, following her around like anxious sheep. I could see it on their faces, the realization that this was bigger than they had ever imagined. And me? I stayed back, calm, almost zen. I had a secret they would never suspect yet. See, the problem wasn't the cabins, the fences, or even Karen's obsessive rules. The problem was the road, the only road in, and I owned it completely, totally, privately, and so far I hadn't needed to interfere at all, just sit back and let nature, mud, and a little human incompetence do the work. But watching Karen scramble like a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, that was just the appetizer. Then came the first major incident. A cement truck arrived at 7:00 a.m., bright and early, ready to pour foundations. Karen, clipboard in hand, was already packing, micromanaging her crew like a drill sergeant. The driver tried to navigate the road and got stuck in the mud. Big time. The truck's tires spun helplessly while the trailer slid sideways, blocking the path entirely. I could hear Karen screaming from 100 yards away, "Move, move, move." She waved her arms like a conductor possessed by a caffeinated symphony. Contractors cursed, residents whispered, and the poor driver was about to cry. And I just walked down the porch steps, whistling softly, pretending I had no idea what was going on. Can you help?" the driver asked, desperation in his eyes. I smiled innocently. "I'll see what I can do," I said, moving just enough gravel to let him inch forward barely. Watching the chaos unfold was like watching a tightrope walker slip over and over again while the crowd screamed. It wasn't just deliveries anymore. Karen had started issuing new emergency orders. Temporary gates had to be installed, speed limits had to be enforced, every pile of dirt had to be measured. I started keeping track, just for fun, of how many rules were being broken at any given moment. Spoiler alert, almost all of them. By late afternoon, Karen had finally collapsed under the weight of her own rules. She sat on a pile of dirt, arms crossed, muttering curses under her breath. HOA board members were trying to mediate disputes between contractors. Residents were complaining about late deliveries, noisy machinery, and the imminent destruction of the community aesthetic. And all I could do was smile. Because here's the thing, they thought they were in control. Every spreadsheet, every rule, every frantic decision made them feel powerful. But their power was an illusion. And illusions are fragile, especially when the only thing keeping their dreams afloat is a little dirt road owned entirely by me. That night, as the sun set and the dust settled, I walked down the road, kicking small stones, listening to the distant murmurs of frustration. I could almost hear Karen screaming in my head, "Why is nothing going right?" And that's when it hit me, I wasn't just watching the chaos, I was building momentum. Every stuck truck, every frustrated contractor, every red-faced HOA member added to the tension. Soon, the perfect storm would reach its peak. and when it did, they would finally realize the truth. The road, the one thing they relied on, the one thing they never questioned, the one thing I controlled. And the fun, oh, the fun was only just beginning. By the 5th week, it had become painfully obvious. The HOA had no idea who or what they were dealing with. They thought their luxury cabins project was under control. They thought their rules, schedules, and frantic walkie-talkie sessions would keep everything in line, but they were wrong, dead wrong. See, there's one thing the HOA didn't count on. The only road in was mine, and they had been driving straight into my little empire of subtle chaos without even realizing it. It started with a delivery truck carrying roofing materials. The driver looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Mud caked every tire, and the trailer was sliding sideways like a kid's toy. Karen was yelling through her megaphone, yes, a megaphone now, while contractors scrambled to save the precious materials from sliding into the ditch. I strolled down the road, whistling softly like a man on a casual evening walk. "Need a hand?" I asked, and the driver's eyes went wide. He looked like a man who had just been offered a lifeline in a hurricane. "I don't know, we're stuck," he stammered. I nodded sagely. "Well, maybe try the other path," I suggested innocently, gesturing vaguely at the muddy track that ended in a tree. He hesitated. Karen was screaming in the distance. And then, slowly, the truth started to settle in for everyone watching. Nothing could move without me. The realization was beautiful. Contractors began muttering, residents whispered among themselves, and Karen's face, oh, Karen's face, that perfect, self-righteous mask of control cracked for the first time. She ran toward me, clipboard swinging, trying to regain her composure. "You can't block the road, we need to finish the cabins," she shouted, voice trembling with the kind of panic I'd only seen in disaster movies. "I'm not blocking anything," I said calmly, leaning against a post and sipping my coffee. "The road just has its own way of behaving." Her jaw dropped. I swear she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Behind her, the HOA board members exchanged worried glances, muttering about legalities, property rights, and lawsuits. They had no idea that the secret I had been holding all along was about to turn their perfectly planned paradise upside down. From that moment on, everything changed. Every truck, every delivery, every contractor movement depended on my goodwill, and let me tell you, my goodwill is selective. Mud puddles appeared mysteriously overnight, gravel shifted in the most inconvenient spots. A fallen tree here, a random detour there, small things, subtle things, but enough to make life extraordinarily difficult. And the best part, Karen had no idea I was orchestrating any of it. I started receiving phone calls from contractors directly. "Hey, can we get some help navigating the road?" they asked sheepishly. "Oh, the road can be tricky," I said innocently. "Sometimes it has a mind of its own." Every frustrated shout from Karen, every exasperated sigh from a board member, every muttered curse from a contractor, it was like music to my ears. And all I had to do was sit back and watch. Then came the ultimate small victory. A delivery of kitchen cabinets got stuck halfway down the road. Karen ran out, waving her arms like she was summoning an army. "This is unacceptable," she screamed. "Who owns this road?" The silence from me was deafening. I looked at her calmly, almost smugly. "Technically, it's mine," I said. Her eyes went wide, the color drained from her face, her voice faltered. The HOA board froze, the contractors stopped mid-curse, and I sipped my coffee and smiled, enjoying the first real hint of panic spreading through the community. At that moment, I realized the full potential of my little secret. Every cabin, every HOA rule, every spreadsheet, they were irrelevant without me. And the chaos? Oh, the chaos had only just begun. Because HOAs thrive on rules, they thrive on control. But all the control in the world doesn't matter when the road, the lifeline of their entire plan, is owned by someone who's just enjoying the show. And for the first time, I felt truly powerful. By week 6, it was no longer just chaos. It had become a full-blown HOA meltdown. Every single person involved in the luxury cabin project seemed to be teetering on the edge of complete hysteria. And me? I was calm, almost eerily so, sitting on my porch with my coffee, watching the dominoes fall exactly where I wanted them. It started with a delivery of roofing shingles. The truck had a tight schedule, the contractor was sweating bullets, and Karen was marching back and forth, clipboard in hand, looking like a general who had just lost an army in a sandbox. "Why is nothing moving?" she shouted, voice carrying across the property. "I want this fixed now." The driver glanced at me like I was some kind of oracle. "Can you, help?" he asked, panic dripping from every word. I leaned against the porch railing, pretending to be deep in thought. Well, it's tricky, I said slowly, savoring the moment. The road, it has its moods, sometimes it's friendly, sometimes it's not. The look on his face was priceless. And Karen, her eyes narrowed as if she could pierce me with her glare, but she had no idea that I literally controlled the path that led to every cabin she'd ever dreamed about. Over the next few hours, the panic spread like wildfire. Contractors argued, workers stomped in the mud, deliveries backed up, and residents wandered the construction area looking increasingly frustrated. Karen started issuing threats, fines, lawsuits, emergency meetings, everything in her over-the-top HOA playbook. But none of it worked. Nothing could work, because every single solution depended on me. And that's when things got even better. A small group of residents, confused and angry, started approaching me directly. "Who owns this road?" one asked, eyes wide. "Why is it impossible to get anything delivered?" I smiled innocently. "Well, technically it's mine," I said, letting the words hang in the air like a loaded gun. The reaction was instantaneous. Gasps, dropped clipboards, and wide eyes everywhere. Contractors froze mid-task. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. HOA board members looked like they had just been slapped with reality. And me? I leaned back, sipping my coffee, enjoying the chaos like a symphony. Soon, Karen realized she had lost control. Every threat she made, every rule she enforced, every desperate yell into her walkie-talkie was useless. The road, the lifeline of her precious cabins, was out of her control. And her panic, oh, it was delicious. She ran up and down the property like a woman possessed, demanding solutions, sending frantic texts, calling lawyers, even trying to negotiate access with contractors. Meanwhile, I started having a little fun. Small things, a strategically placed mud puddle here, a fallen branch there, a pile of gravel accidentally blocking a path. Nothing permanent, nothing illegal, just enough to keep them flailing. Every misstep they made me grin. By late afternoon, Karen was officially unhinged. She stomped into the middle of the construction site, waving her arms and shouting at anyone who would listen. "This is unacceptable. We cannot finish the cabins without access." I walked calmly toward her, taking slow, deliberate steps. "Well, you do have access," I said, "if you're willing to follow my rules." Her jaw dropped, the HOA board froze. Contractors exchanged confused glances, and the residents, oh, they started whispering. I could hear snippets of conversation. "He owns the road, he's been controlling everything." For the first time, Karen's perfect little community plan looked fragile, like a sandcastle being eaten by the tide. The perfect cabins, the rules, the meticulous planning, it was all irrelevant. The road was mine, and as long as it was, they were at my mercy. That night, I walked down the muddy path, listening to the distant sounds of frustration, yelling, and chaos. Contractors groaned. Karen muttered curses under her breath. Residents whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of the disaster, and I sipped my coffee, smiling. Calm, patient, in complete control. Because here's the truth, HOAs love rules, spreadsheets, and control. But when the most important thing, the lifeline of their perfect community, is owned by someone else, well, that's when the real fun begins. And the fun, oh, the fun was only getting started. By the 7th week, Karen had officially lost her mind. I swear, she looked like a character from a horror movie, eyes wild, face red, and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. Every HOA rule she'd ever enforced, every spreadsheet she'd created, every meeting she'd micromanaged, it was all crumbling before her eyes. It all came to a head one bright morning. The delivery trucks were stuck again, this time with a full load of kitchen cabinets, lumber, and roofing materials. Karen stormed onto the property, flanked by 2 HOA board members, her heels crunching on the gravel like battle drums. "You cannot do this," she shouted, waving her arms like she was trying to part the sea. "We have permits, we have rules, we have rights." I leaned casually against my porch railing, sipping coffee, and smiled. "You do," I said slowly, "but the road is mine." The words hit her like a lightning bolt. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. What do you mean?" she stammered, voice shaking. "I mean every truck, every delivery, every contractor, they all need this road," I explained. "Technically speaking, they can't get anywhere without it, and it's private property, mine." For a second, I thought she might faint. The HOA board members looked like they'd been hit with a tornado. Contractors froze mid-task, unsure if they should curse, laugh, or cry. Residents peered from a distance, whispering, "He owns the road." Karen's panic turned into full-blown rage. She waved her clipboard like a sword. "This isn't legal, you can't do this, I'll call lawyers, You can call whoever you want," I interrupted calmly. "But until the road is cleared, nothing moves. The cabins, your rules, your spreadsheets, they're meaningless. This road decides who enters and exits, and right now it obeys me." Her face twisted. I swear I saw smoke rising from her ears. The contractors, desperate to get the deliveries moving, tried to negotiate. Maybe we can adjust the path, one suggested nervously. I raised an eyebrow. Sure, you can try, but good luck getting the cement mixer through that mud puddle over there, I said, nodding subtly at a strategically placed obstacle I'd left the night before. The driver groaned. Karen screamed, contractors cursed, residents whispered, and the air vibrated with tension. She tried another tactic, bribery. We can pay, I shook my head. It's not about money, Karen, it's about access, and right now you don't have it. Then came the lawsuit's threat. I'll take this to court, she shouted. By all means, I said, calm as ever, but until then, no road, no cabins, no delivery, enjoy the view. Her perfect little plan was unraveling like a cheap sweater. Every threat, every rule, every demand she had relied on was useless without access to the road, and the look on her face, priceless. The kind of face that makes you want to bottle it up and keep it forever. I took a slow sip of coffee, surveying the chaos. Delivery trucks stuck, contractors arguing, HOA members panicking, residents gawking. And Karen was packing like a caged tiger, shrieking at anyone within earshot. It was poetry, pure chaotic poetry. Then she made her final, desperate move. She tried to physically block the road, shouting orders to contractors to remove the obstacles I'd subtly placed. It was like watching someone try to hold back a tidal wave with a piece of cardboard. I walked down the driveway, calm and deliberate, and said, Karen, you really should have asked who owns the road before building your perfect little paradise. Her jaw dropped, she froze. I could almost hear her heartbeat echoing in the air. For a split second, I felt a flicker of sympathy, and then I smiled because the entire property, every truck, every cabin, every frantic HOA board member was mine to control. And that's when I knew the final act was coming. Karen's last stand had failed spectacularly. The chaos was hers to endure, but the true control was mine, and no amount of yelling, paperwork, or threats could change that. Because the road decides everything, and I own the road. By week 8, the tension had reached its peak. Karen's frantic energy, the panicked contractors, the confused HOA board members, and the frustrated residents had all reached a boiling point. And me? I was calm, sitting on my porch with my coffee, knowing that the final act was about to unfold. That morning, Karen came barreling down the driveway, clipboard in hand, red-faced and furious. I've had enough, she shouted. This is ridiculous, I demand access. I leaned back, smiling, and finally decided it was time for the big reveal. Karen, I said slowly, letting the suspense hang in the air like a storm cloud. You've been working so hard, following all your rules, managing every detail, and yet you've completely missed one tiny, crucial fact. Her glare could have melted steel. What fact? She demanded. I stood up, taking a slow, deliberate stroll down the driveway toward her. This, I said, pointing at the dirt path leading to the cabins. This road, the one every truck, every delivery, every contractor, and every resident relies on to get here, it's mine, completely, privately, legally, and until now you had no access. For a moment silence fell, contractors stopped mid-task, residents froze, whispering among themselves. Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The HOA board members looked like they'd just seen a ghost. Then like a tidal wave, the reality hit. Every delayed delivery, every frustrated contractor, every ruined schedule, they were all because of me. Every complaint, every emergency meeting, every frantic phone call Karen had made pointless. Utterly, hilariously pointless. You own the road, Karen sputtered, eyes wide, hands trembling. Yes, I said calmly. And that means I get to decide who comes in when they come in and how fast they move. Your rules, your fines, your spreadsheets, they don't matter here. This road obeys me. Her face twisted in disbelief and then slowly pure frustration. She stomped her feet, waved her clipboard, and shouted, "This isn't legal, you can't do this. I held up a hand. By all means, try, but until the courts decide, the cabins only get built if I allow access, and for now, I'm in charge." And just like that, the tension shifted. Contractors cheered quietly, relieved that someone finally had a plan. Residents started laughing under their breath, whispering about the Road King. And Karen? She flailed, realizing her perfectly controlled paradise had been completely undermined by a single, privately owned dirt path. I let the moment linger, savoring it. Then I did something unexpected. I smiled and said, "Don't worry, Karen, you'll still get your cabins. Everyone will get what they want, but on my terms. And honestly, it's a lot more fun this way." Her mouth dropped open again. I swear I saw a tiny spark of respect or maybe fear, probably both. Over the next few days, the final deliveries rolled in, the cabins went up, and chaos slowly gave way to order, but under my terms. Every truck passed smoothly. Every contractor knew who was really in control. And Karen, well, she learned a very valuable lesson about humility, patience, and the dangers of assuming total control. As I walked down the road one last time, kicking a small pebble and listening to the distant laughter of residents finally enjoying their cabins, I felt a sense of satisfaction that was hard to put into words. The cabins were built. The HOA had survived barely, and I had reminded everyone exactly who really held the power. Because HOAs love rules, spreadsheets, and control, but at the end of the day, the real power isn't in fines, meetings, or even authority. It's in the little things, the things nobody notices until it's too late, and in this case, it was a simple dirt road. I took a final sip of coffee, smiled at the cabins shining in the late afternoon sun, and thought to myself, sometimes the key to winning isn't fighting harder. It's knowing what they're counting on and quietly controlling it. And that, my friends, is how I let the HOA build 50 luxury cabins and still manage to remind everyone who really owns the neighborhood. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.